All right, and so we are back. Hey.
Oh, welcome back.
So before we went to our little break there, we were just wrapping up on the Frankenstein story, the novel, and sort of talking about why we liked it and all of the sort of interesting things that it has inspired going forward. And one of those, of course, now we're going to talk about was a later novel. And I don't know how you guys feel about that one, but Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Did you both read it before? Have you both read the book? Yeah?
I have read it, yes, indeed.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Okay, so how did you feel about it? Like, whoever wants to answer first. Rachel, let's do Rachel this time. How did you feel about the novel?
Okay, I was in love with the writing style in the sense that it was coming from a character's perspective, and they were doing it in journal entries.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that it built up to the action. And I just love how well developed the characters are. Van Helsing, Nina, Lucy. I just love all of them. And just the context of the story. But I think for me, the cons were it took a long time to get where it was going. If that makes sense. But now that you mentioned that it was a penny dreadful, and they were probably dragging it out,
No, that one wasn't a penny dreadful. No, Bram Stoker's novel wasn't. Barney the Vampire was.
I'm sorry to say that I found it slightly on the boring side.
I'm with you on that. How did you feel about it, Ian? Were you kind of the same?
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved the Frankenstein novel.
Mm-hmm.
I found Dracula very
dry.
Very dry, yes. Yeah, dry and difficult to get through.
Yeah, it was. It is.
Yep.
But I actually find the Bram Stoker's Dracula movie it takes all the action, takes all the good bits from the novel, and really highlights them and makes it look really beautiful on screen.
Now, was this the one with Keanu Reeves?
Yes, that's right.
See, I found that painful to watch. I honestly,
because it's the
I did not like
him.
I did not like him as Jonathan Harker at all. I thought that Gary Oldman was brilliant. I just didn't like Keanu in that role, but I did like everybody else in the film. But the book, I'm with both of you guys on this. Boring as all get out. It's like.
I'll agree with that assessment of the film. It's very slow moving, just like the book. My favorite actually is one of the very earliest films based on the Dracula story called Nosferatu.
Oh, love Nosferatu.
Yeah,
it was a 1922 German movie, silent film.
Yeah.
And that is my absolute favorite Dracula movie.
Me too. Brilliantly done. And next to that is the making of Nosferatu with Willem Dafoe. And he was amazing as, in the making of Nosferatu. So you got to see just, sort of that craziness. And then, of course, you had Malkovich in there, too. So it was well done. But I found Dracula a very dry read. Like, it's hard to get through the first, 5 or 6 chapters of that book. I mean, once you get past that, the story starts to pick up, and it starts to get into, where Harker gets on the train and he goes to Transylvania, and you do that. But the beginning is just sort of like, oh gosh, I'm, like, can I get through this novel? And
dry, yeah, dry.
Yeah.
But I love the concept. I'm all about vampires.
The concept is fantastic. But it's not original at this point. But it isn't original at this point. Unlike Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, her novel was completely original. Stoker's Dracula was kind of a play on a lot of other vampire stories that had, like Varney. Like I really feel like Varney the Vampire was kind of the basis for this novel. And then taking the old concept of Vlad Tepes and, Vlad Dracula and turning it into that sort of concept. And of course, that concept.
His book was a lot of the information that was drawn into the writing came from the vampire legends of the folklore from Romania and Transylvanian superstitions.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, and what's funny too is that in the novel itself, there were pieces actually removed from the novel, like the final draft of the novel. And one of them was, I think, should have stayed in the novel, because to me it sort of made the story more interesting, right? It was, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but there was a draft of the final chapter. So when Dracula dies, his castle falls apart and crumbles and disappears. And it sort of hides the fact that vampires ever existed or were ever there. And it's a bit like, here we go again, back to Rocky Horror, when the house disappears and takes off and leaves the planet and goes back to, leaving,
well, that happened in Nosferatu as well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so I think that, it was a lot of things put together. And I know that people, it's a classic novel. It really is. It's a classic horror novel. And there's some really, really great moments in it. And it has a really great story. It's just a really tough read because it's so slow and so plodding. And there's an awful lot of, to me today, if Stoker had submitted that book to an editor, they would have cut it to ribbons.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt.
Wait, Dracula, yeah.
I was excited to read it because I heard, because I wanted to learn more about Dracula. But once we started getting reading it in our English language classes, it became a slog, and I was so disappointed that that's how it felt. Like it was just dragging along. It's like, get to the point, man.
Well, I think the problem is that Stoker was trying a little bit to copy Mary Shelley's Frankenstein sort of idea with the letters and the diary entries and the newspaper articles and the logs from the ships and that it became confusing as well as to where all those pieces of the puzzle fit together. And I think there was too many narratives in the story. Personally, I feel like there was too much of that. And it took away from the immediate. I think it would have been way more interesting had it been written from, Jonathan's perspective solely, or from Nina's perspective solely, or, like that kind of thing, right? Or even from Dracula's perspective.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah, it would have been I think it would have been more interesting having been written from Dracula's perspective and not from Harker and then all of these other accounts of, these things. And I think that today, like I said, literally an editor would be like, okay, we can keep this, but we need to do something with how it's presented. And I found it horribly painful. And the film, to me, too, the same thing, right? And, I know folks love Keanu Reeves, and, I personally don't think he's a good actor. He seems like he's a really great human being, but I'm not a fan of his acting, and I just thought he was not the right fit for that film. He's very wooden, very just, lacking any kind of emotion in the film. And I mean, if it wasn't for Gary Oldman in that film, it would have tanked 100%. Because he was what brought any kind of interest to the film. But the book itself too is a very hard read. You know, the story is interesting, and it has, you know, it has, and then there was, I don't know if you guys know this, but you know that there's a sequel to this book, right?
No.
Oh.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, apparently there's a sequel that was written by, I want to say, is it Stoker's grandson or some such thing, that wrote a sequel to Dracula. I'm just going to look it up because I came across it one day and I was like, there's a sequel? So it shows you how much it actually got.
Oh, I was unaware of that.
Yep, it's I believe it's called Dracula the Undead. It's a 2009 sequel to his 1897. The book was written by his great-grandnephew, Dacre Stoker, and Ian Holt. I don't know why. You know, I guess I'm guessing it was an attempt to cash in on Bram Stoker's story and name. I don't know.
Most
you know,
likely.
I don't want
to
assume
probably.
that automatically, but it just really seems that, you know, and the premise to it is that 25 years have passed since the vampire Count Dracula met his ends at the hands of Jonathan Harker and Quincy Morris. Though they were victorious in their quest, a band of heroes has now become a broken shadow of its former self, and Seward has become a morphine addict, oppressed with stamping out the undead. Holmwood hides behind his loveless marriage, and Harker drowns his sorrows in alcohol, and prostitutes over Mina, remaining her taints over Dracula that have, you know, kind of overtaken her life. In the beginning of the novel, it goes with Seward tracking down Elizabeth Bathory, whom he believes is a vampire. So we're really kind of stretching at, you know, the story here by attempting to bring, you know, Elizabeth Bathory into it, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And of course, you know, everybody was so affected by Dracula's presence that they've all become drug addicts and alcoholics, and you know.
Awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to have to look into her at some point too, I think.
Oh, Elizabeth Bathory? Yeah, for sure.
A Black Passion cousin. Yeah. And we all know, I don't know if many people know the story. Ian, do you know much about Countess Bathory?
No, I don't.
Bathory? Yeah.
No.
I know quite a fair bit about her, so.
You do think? What do you know about?
I do indeed. Well, you know, here's the thing from my thoughts on Elizabeth Bathory, in a nutshell, and we can do a show on her. But again, I do not believe most of the stories that were perpetuated around her. I think that she was used as a scapegoat, and she was a woman, and she was a powerful woman with money. And at that time, she stood in the way of a lot of men who were looking to, you know, sort of find their place. And that the easiest way to get rid of a woman is to label her a witch, a vampire, a prostitute, you know, whatever you want to call it, right? Suddenly at that point, she becomes unscrupulous, and her power and is taken from her and stripped from her, and that's kind of what happened to Elizabeth Bathory too in history. So, you know, do I believe you know, bathed in baby's blood and the blood of virgins and drank? No, I don't. You know, but again, that's from me doing a ton of research on the subject at hand. But again, you know, she, much like Vlad Tepes, who again, depending on who you ask, is a hero or a villain, you know, his story is quite different. And maybe we can actually do a show on, you know, Vlad and Elizabeth together, since they were related. You know, we could do a
that would be good.
Vlad, an hour on Elizabeth.
I was quite